Well, it's been a little bit more challenging than well, it's been about as challenging as I thought it would be. But then, of course, I always con myself. That's how I'd say, "Oh, this is not going to be easy. This is not going to be a problem. This is going to be easy. This is not going to be hard. This is not going to be a problem." It's always a problem. It's kind of a little bit disorienting to live in a place that's well. We're still in. I just got hot water. Okay, we just got a heater in on. I think it was Friday. So I've been living 4 days in a cold water place, and it's been a challenge. But it's a challenge I'm willing to put up with because I very much like my location. I like my location a lot. So I've been thinking about challenges, and one of the challenges I think of moving to another country, aside from whether the language is different or not, is the currency. You know, some people really every single morning they look and see what is the exchange rate, because there is a tendency, to think that 5 pesos is worth 5 cents, and it's not. 5 pesos is actually worth about 25 cents or even 30 cents, depending on the exchange rate that day. And sometimes it's worth only 20 cents, but it's not worth a nickel. And you have to always sort of remembering that. And the other thing you have to do that I haven't had to do since I was a kid in New York, which was, as we know, a long time ago. And my mother actually would say, now be sure to count your change, because it was just common that, well, the pennies didn't come to you. If you bought something for, 20 cents or 25 cents or 24 cents, and you gave them, a quarter, getting that penny back might be something. It's like the butcher putting his thumb on the scale when he weighed things. Because now people go to stores and it's all prepackaged, and that happens here quite a bit. It actually, believe it happened at Costco about a week or so ago. I went, oh my God. So what they generally do is they get you on a half a peso, and that is a tiny little coin, which I don't have one on me right now. It's you go like, oh, this is worthless. But if you look at it, there's actually says 50 on it. So it's worth a half a peso, which is actually around maybe 3 cents or 4 cents, a peso fluctuates between 5 cents, 6 cents, 7, 8 cents. A peso, which says 1 on it, that's what it's worth. It's not worth just 1 peso. It's worth a peso, but in dollars, in cents, it's worth more. Anyway, I was at Costco, and I don't usually pay in cash at Costco. I usually use a credit card, but I decided to pay in cash, and I don't know, the bill was 2,400 pesos, which is about $130 off the top of my head. And I didn't have the exact change. And I had to give him 500 peso bills. A 500 peso bill is not $500. It's about right around now, maybe $28 or $29. But I knew that my change should be 470 pesos. And he put a 200 peso note out. And I went, it's cuatrocientos, no, not four. And he went, oh, as if he was like overwhelmed with a bill, and he put it out. And I went, and that was at Costco, and it's very, very rare. Where it usually happens is at small shops, or not. It could happen at a chain store. I've never had it happen to me at a place like OXXO, which is the equivalent of a 7-Eleven. Anyway, before I get too much into that, I've been watching other people's videos a lot. People who have recently come here or who have been living here for 7 or 8 years, and why people come and why they leave. Generally, the real reason that most people leave is we get old, and they have Medicare care or VA care in the United States, and they're having some issue, and they don't want to drive an hour, 2 hours, or get on a plane flight to go get medical care. That's the real thing that really do see, that somebody has had a medical issue, and or somebody has died, and the spouse does not want to stay here alone, so they go. If they have family up there, they go where it's familiar. That's the biggest thing when you move to another country, is that nothing is familiar. And at first it's quite exciting and very interesting. And there is a sense of freedom here. There isn't this sense of gotcha that I always find in the United States, where there's the police, where you've got a tail light out, or, your license plate tag, they can't see it, because you just drove through a mud pile. You don't have that here. They do get you in Tijuana. I will tell you, if you're driving a fancy car and you're going to Tijuana, it's got American plates on it, and you're saying, you might as well just put a sign on your car that says, stop me and ask for a bribe. And I know we're not supposed to pay, and I know they say it doesn't happen as much as it does, but it does happen. The other thing that disappoints people here is to find out that Americans come here and we create a class society. We all know that Malibu and Beverly Hills are where rich people live, and we all know that rich people live in Georgetown and Washington, D.C., and New York City has Park Avenue. And I guess now they've made Soho. They've made almost all cities, San Francisco, all cities have been places where only rich people can afford to live. And then you sort of have to live in an hour or two or three outside of town of where you work, which always wasn't always that way. And there are still parts of the states, I don't know, I hear. Mexico City, they have their rich people live in certain areas of Mexico City, and people who are working middle class work in other parts, and people who are working class, and people who are poor. So they do have that division everywhere, but not quite as starkly as when Americans come here and they buy in cash often because first, you're not going to get a mortgage from Mexico unless you have income in Mexico. But they've sold their home and they come here. And they buy something and they pay more than any Mexican would pay, in their right mind would pay. Even rich Mexicans, forget that. I'm not paying that money. But we go, oh, wow, what a bargain compared to the United States. And all my Mexican friends, they were always appalled when they found out what my rents were. I'd say, I'm paying $1,000. You're paying $1,000 a month. Because I was living in American communities, and Americans charge each other more money. If you live in an American community, you're going to pay more money because Americans run that community, and you're renting an American's house. But I do remember, it was a few years ago when I'd come back after I'd been away for a year for a family matter. And I'd gone to a party down the street from where I lived, and I don't, as we all know, I'm a bit of an introvert. That's why I make videos, and I don't talk to people in person. I do talk to a few people. And 40 minutes in, I'm like, oh my God, the noise, the music, the people, I'm going to lose my mind. I got to get out of here. But it was a cobblestone street out front, and I'd worn sandals because I wanted to look cute. And I knew there was going to be, I needed help. So I asked this kid, he was like 50, somebody 30 years younger than me at the time. Well, no, I was still in my 70s. I said, hey, could you walk me down the street? His name was Robert, and I got to get home, and I'm wearing my sandals, my slip and slides. And he said, sure. And we stepped outside, and I said, what a nice party. And the guy was like, I don't know, maybe 78, or he was up there in my age range. But this guy was like, I think he was in his early 50s, a little bit of a rascal, as we call him. And he said, I said, he said, well, how do you feel about being back? I said, I'm really happy to be back. It's great to be back in Mexico. You have that sense of freedom, of ease that I never feel in the United States. I always feel, what if something goes wrong? It's going to cost a fortune. Here I go. If something goes wrong, I'm going to call Armando. He's going to fix it. And it's not going to cost a fortune. And he said, well, we're all damaged here. All of us are damaged. And I was, what? How negative and cynical. What do you mean damaged? And I said, no, I don't feel that we're all damaged here. No, we went home. But, I went and thought about it. Why do people come to Mexico? Why do people move to any other country? But why do we? Because it takes money, to come to Mexico. Whether you are on the high end, you've got $2 million and 4% in an account, and you're also getting your full Social Security, and maybe you've also got a pension from where you worked, or you're in a union. That would be on the high end. Or if you are a single woman who maybe has $1,000 a month in Social Security, those people are here too, and also men. And he's right. We were all hurt in some ways. That's why we left. That's even why the rich have left. We were hurt by our country. we could not make ends meet there. Or we were laid off a job unexpectedly in our 50s. And we go, oh, how? And if you were lucky, you had a house you could rent out, which is how I did it the first time. I had a house that I was able to rent out, and by renting that house, I could pay for what I was paying here in Mexico. And actually, I did a crazy thing. Like when I first came to Mexico 20 years ago, I bought a house, which was a bad idea. That's another story which I'll tell you, because it's actually kind of funny. Well, in a sort of way, it's funny. In a sort of macabre way. I'm still alive. But I do think that he was right, we're all damaged in some way. We've been damaged by our experiences in the United States, and we've come to Mexico or other countries seeking a better life for ourselves. And most of us, I don't know what the ratios are. I really know very few people who have moved back to the United States, but there are people who arrived here 15 or 18 or 20 years ago when it was really very reasonable and easy to buy a piece of land. Well, it's never easy to buy a piece of land here because you have to get a special permit from the government because you're a foreigner. They have a 17th century law on the Constitution that foreigners can't own land near the ocean. You could go inland onto the central part of Mexico, near the ocean or near a border, and you could buy without this thing. But I live on the coast. I live in Baja California. So there are people, and I'm one of them. I was very, very damaged, I felt, by, first of all, I'm a writer, but it became very difficult for me to find work in Hollywood after I got into my 40s. And then I taught. I was at the university for a couple of years. And then I just felt, life was I could just feel how much tougher life was getting. It sort of changed it around the Reagan years. And I said, this is really getting hard. But I did have real estate. That was one of the things I had been able to buy in the 1980s. I had taken some maneuvering on my part, but I managed to get in. And remember, in the 1970s, women still did not have credit cards. We could not get credit cards without our husband's signature. So that was a big thing that happened. In the 1970s, women could get credit cards. And that changed also our alignment with a mortgage, for instance, getting mortgages. My friend, Stockard Channing, had to pay cash for her house because, which was at that time around $700,000, because she, even though she had a trust fund, I think everybody knows that Stockard was wealthy, and she had a trust fund, but she couldn't get the bank to release it to her because she was a woman, and she had to threaten to sue them to get her money to do that. But I did not have anybody leave me $1 million when I was 21. I don't know if it was $1 million. I shouldn't talk out of turn about her. But she was a very wise woman as she bought that property, and we won't talk about her. But I didn't have that. I had to skirt around and recreate my taxes and do all kinds of things to get a second mortgage. But the economy changed and it got worse, actually, after I bought. It got worse. And I was like, oh my God. And I had to rent out rooms in my house in order to make ends meet, to make that mortgage, because the mortgage was like at 13%. I bought in 1985. 13%. So the thing is, how adventuresome are you? If you're adventuresome, I say, look into other countries. If you have some money set aside, and if you don't have some money set aside, start doing it. Because regardless of who wins this next election, and I certainly hope it's not the guy who has a criminal record, the rebuilding is going to take time. It's really going to take time. And for people who are in their 60s, we really have to start banding together to create security for ourselves. Because the big deal in the United States is if, God forbid, something happens to you, a chronic illness, Alzheimer's, dementia, there's no safety net. If it happens to me here, I can afford help. I can afford care. And that was always, there were two reasons the main two reasons I left. Veterinary care was costing me $150 a month for my aging dog, and that was 12 years ago. I didn't want to think about what it costs now. And Medicare, it's very limited. So That guy, that young guy, he was he was in love with an older woman who didn't live there. She'd moved, and he sold his property and he went back to the United States. And who knows? That was a few years ago. That was 6 years ago. So maybe in 10 years we'll see him again. Anyway, I'm hanging in there.